Everyone having a fun Jenkins world so far? Oh, that doesn't sound like it. All right. Cool. Just wait for our last guest to be seated. We'll get started. So welcome everyone to the Blue Ocean State of the Union. My name is James Dumais, and I'm Director of Product Management at CloudBees, but I'm also the creator of Blue Ocean. As you could probably tell by my accent, I am an Australian. We would say Australian. No, I've been in the United States too long now. Australian, and then you would say Australian, like you would really put the "ost" into it. So what I was going to do, because you seem kind of this low energy here, I'm going to teach you some Australian words before we start. But more importantly, how to say them. And then, so I'm going to say an Australian word, and then you're going to yell it out really loud, but you've got to try and sound Australian. And like, if you've ever seen Flight of the Conchords, you know the difference between an Australian accent and a New Zealander accent. Apparently the New Zealanders, they think that it sounds like an evil accent, a version of their accent. So, all right. So we'll start with a classic Australian word, crikey. Come on, let's do it again. Crikey. That's better. All right. I'm not going to do the shrimp on the barbecue thing because we call them prawns. So, but we'll do barbecue. Barbecue. Oh, it's good. All right. Now this one is a little difficult for the North Americans. Beer. Let's go for some beers, right? Yeah, right. So yes, I am Australian. I'm from Sydney, which is home to beautiful places like the Sydney Opera House and the Bridge and nice beaches. Not all of us surf, but we are also very cruel to our friends. Terrible, always playing a game of one-upmanship. So if you see the Australians around the conference that work for CloudBees, they're probably ripping into each other. So, all right. So today I'm here to talk to you about Blue Ocean. And how many of you are using Blue Ocean? Woohoo! That's a good proportion. Who is going to use Blue Ocean after being at Jenkins World? Yeah, that's what I want to see. Cool. Really appreciate you guys trying it out, and we really look forward to your feedback. So this is the first Blue Ocean State of the Union, which I hope there is many of in the next couple of years. We actually introduced Blue Ocean at Jenkins World last year in beta form, and things have come along a lot since then. So I'm going to just maybe, who doesn't know what Blue Ocean is and has been at Jenkins World and hasn't got? Yeah. All right. So for those who are not familiar with it, which I think is just one guy, have you been at this conference? Okay. It's the new user experience for Jenkins designed from the ground up for teams practicing continuous delivery. So it's like a complete rethink about the way that Jenkins works. I guess we were very lucky to, I've been lucky to be involved in Jenkins sort of fairly recently. I've been working at CloudBees for almost 2 years now. Before that, I was working for another software company which had a very similar product, and somehow found my way building a second one. And so that's always good. It's like those dreams that you have where you go to sleep and you have this dream where it's like where you live like parts of your life again. So like commonly when we're like solving problems in Blue Ocean, I'm like, this is totally familiar. Let's not do that thing that failed. So it's good to have another shot at this. The reason why we've built Blue Ocean is really that there is this growing diversity of developers. And Mark Andreessen talks about software eating the world. And what he's really talking about is that every business is powered by software somewhere, right? And what that means is that there are more people who are coming in to write software or to manage software that may have not been doing that 10 years ago. And so it's really important for us that as the diversity of developers grows, different backgrounds, different skill sets, that we give them the tools to be successful. So I was just commenting to John, who's our designer, who's here in the audience, that it's sort of like our job to go through all the blood, sweat, and tears of coming up with good developer tools so that you guys don't have to go through that. right? So it's a bit of a persecution thing, I guess, in a way. So we think long and hard about things, and usually in Blue Ocean, when we say no to things, it just means that we haven't really thought about it as deeply as we should. So there's also more complexity in everybody's modern life, right? And in their workplace and in their work life, and there's a lot less time. So if our developer tools can actually help us, deal with the amount of complexity in our lives, we can save time. And that means that you can be going, instead of beating your head against a CI server or a web server or whatever you're trying to do, you can go and spend that time, hopefully with your family, but probably doing more work, because that's how it usually runs. So, to cater for the needs of modern developers, our tools, they need to be powerful, but they need to be easy to use, and they should improve the whole team's understanding of how software gets delivered. So to have a language that you can use and share with the people who manage your business, so that you're not like, if I'm talking about a continuous delivery pipeline and our CEO is talking about a continuous delivery pipeline, well, my CEO should know what one is. We're actually speaking, the same language. And so by simplifying tools, we can simplify the language so there's less to understand, and you can then describe what is actually happening in a process in much simpler terms, which means that everybody should be able to understand. So, so for us in Blue Ocean, it really means that continuous delivery needs to be accessible by everyone in the organization. So I'll show you a little bit about that in a second. There was this great quote from Charity Majors, who's this amazing woman who I follow on Twitter. She's the CEO of this great operations software company called Honeycomb, and she said on Twitter, and it was quite a long rant, and this is just a small section of it, release engineering and developer tooling are systematically underinvested in nearly every 50 to 500 person company that I know. And she works with a lot of software companies of this size. And really what she's talking about is that the tools that we have today don't nearly meet the sort of requirements to maximize the potential of the platforms that we have available. So I've got a little illustration to show you. So imagine this for a moment. Time is going by, and as time increases, so does the power of our software and all of the ecosystem around it. Now, so if you think about Amazon Web Services, it's the same AWS that you use, that Netflix used to deliver their massively streaming, TV platform into the homes of people all around the world. So what separates you from Amazon? Well, your tools are going to do that, right? A lot of free and open source tools are sometimes not very good or have been built for different purposes. And so what these big companies do is they invest a lot of money and time into internal tooling so that they can maximize the potential of the platforms and the technologies that they have available. So I think we can do a lot more with this gap between the peak potential and the available tools, and that's really what Blue Ocean is all about in an essence. So we really want to go ahead and fill it as much as we can. So today we're going to start with continuous delivery pipelines, but I think the sky's the limit. So really what we want to do with Blue Ocean is make sure that continuous delivery is you can easily create a continuous delivery process, and that process is easily understood. So that's what we're doing. That's where we're going in our first phase. So we've taken two angles to this in Blue Ocean. So firstly is the visual pipeline editor, and this is the tool that allows you to build a pipeline visually. So it's what you see is what you get experience, or WYSIWYG, if you remember that from the hot dog software days, on the web. And at the moment, so what this allows you to do is really very quickly prototype a CD pipeline and try it out and rinse, repeat. And it has some great features in it such as being connected to your version control system. So, the pipeline that you're creating here with the editor is actually a file that's stored alongside your application code. So this is great. Like if you stuff up your pipeline or you need to roll back your application, everything's versioned together so you can use it like a time machine if you're familiar with version control systems. So there is a bit of a potential gap at the moment, referring to the last slide that I showed you, between what is possible in Jenkins and what is possible in our visual editor. So for the next 12 months, we're going to be spending a lot of time, a lot of design time, a lot of product time, me talking to you guys, and engineering time to reduce the gap between what's possible in Jenkins and what the editor allows you to get access to. Right. Now, I mentioned it's what you see is what you get experience. So as you can see here, once we go and run our pipeline and it gets executed, it is visualized in the exact same way as you built it, which is really great. So, I mentioned before about like having this language that you can use, a simple language that you can use to describe like what you're doing as an engineer and how important the pipeline is to actually delivering software for your business, which is ultimately delivering value to your customers, right? So if you ask a developer what CD is all about, they'll say it's about deploying software. But if you ask a CEO or a CTO of a Fortune 1000 company, they'll be saying, this is like the engine that makes me more competitive compared to another company, right? Because the more we can automate, the faster we can get to market, and the better we can be competing against other companies in our arena. So I have a good friend of mine who's a CTO in Sydney, and it was an early adopter of Blue Ocean. And what was really great is he was like describing this kind of classic problem, like engineering needs more engineering resources in order to get the software out. Like I saw the software working on a developer's workstation. I did a over the shoulder. Why can't that be on our website? Like why can't that be on our servers right now? And for some business leaders, that's a really they've never been engineers before. They don't understand the sort of finesse and all of the problems involved, the raw complexity involved in actually building good software. And so he was able to actually have this conversation with his director of marketing about what the continuous delivery pipeline was and the processes in which the software has to go through in order to go live. And that bought him more time to actually deliver a great product, right? So it's improving. The more we can improve the understanding of our different perspectives, the better we're able to work together, and the better the results are going to be for the business. So having this visualization from that perspective is really important. But for developers, it's also extremely important because having a clear window into a complex process means that you can find problems, you can solve problems quicker. And that's really what we've designed the visualization for from an engineering perspective. So, what you can see here is a pipeline that's going through multiple different phases, and you can click on these different dots and get into the details of like what's happening. And I'll probably show you a demo towards the end of the talk, just so that unless you saw the keynote, you probably missed it. So, cool. So let's just go quickly through our year-end review. So I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, we launched the Blue Ocean 1.0 beta in September last year at Jenkins World. Now, the practice of continuous delivery encourages us to, move quickly. So when we released Blue Ocean, not a lot of it worked very well in beta form. We needed to get something out into the hands of users like yourself, and we wanted to get continuous feedback. So we were publishing even up until the beta publicly without telling anyone almost from the very first commit into the Jenkins Experimental Update Center every week, and sometimes multiple times a week, so that we could demo it and show customers and show Jenkins users. So we actually built a pipeline to ship those betas and run the releases for us. And that really enabled us to move very quickly and get feedback. So we're kind of, you've probably heard the expression eating your own dog food. So if you own a dog food factory, you got to feed it to your dog to make sure that the dog food's good, and then you can sell dog food. So it was a really huge result. At the end of Jenkins World, our stats kind of take about a month to come in to get the real numbers. After launching it that week, we had about 1,000 installations of the beta, which was just really incredible. And I think it goes to show sort of how much pent-up demand there is for a tool like Blue Ocean. Unfortunately, as the product guy, I spend a lot of time saying no to people, and I don't like saying no to people because with Jenkins we're replacing a widely adopted and much beloved tool that has all these features that are useful to people's work, integral parts of people's workflows. And so there's this great workflow XKCD comic, if you're not familiar with the comic, and it's like they remove last update, broke my workflow, and it was like some unintended side effect that this person was relying on. So there's a lot of that, and it's a real challenge to manage that sentiment and behavior from our very passionate user base that we have with Jenkins. So if you ever get in touch with me and I say no to something, it's usually not because I think it's a bad idea, it's probably because I haven't thought about it deeply. So when I gave a talk at Jenkins World in last year, I showed a sneak preview of the pipeline editor, and what we quickly realized after launching the beta was that the pipeline language itself needed to be a little bit more structured. So we were getting a lot of feedback from users saying, I like this whole idea of a continuous delivery pipeline in Jenkins. I'm familiar with that. I want to get onto continuous delivery, but I don't want to learn Groovy to get there, right? And why should you learn Groovy to get there? That's just awful. We're just putting all of these barriers in front of you to you want to get to market faster. You want to deploy your software. Why are we making you learn a programming language that, I'm sure some of you now know it, but people don't want to do that. So, they won't create pipelines. They'll continue creating freestyle jobs, right? So in order to change behavior, we have to make things easier and more approachable. So we released Declarative Pipeline, which is a rethink of how the pipeline language looks. So what we've been doing is, in tandem with the development of Blue Ocean, is actually going back and improving parts of the Jenkins platform so that we can, get better results for you guys. So with Declarative, what we realized when we were building the editor is that we're going to need a model in which the editor is able to take a Jenkins file, read it into memory, modify it, and then spit it back out and put it into a repository. And what's not possible to do is parse a script that you've written in Groovy, interpret what you think it did, and then visualize it, and then have you modify it, and then it go back into the repository in a form that you recognize. So we really needed a structure to a Jenkins file, the way that you declare a pipeline. So what is the language that we have? So I spoke about languages earlier. So we have a pipeline, we have a stage, we have a parallel stage, and we have a step. Really simple language. We don't have for loops, if statements. You don't have the cognitive load of a whole programming language. It's there under the hood. If you need it, you can break out and write a bit of script in a declarative Jenkins file. But all you really need to know is what those things are and how they're structured in the file to be able to write a declarative Jenkins file. So simplify the language, simplify the tools, simplify the conversation around it. So it's really not possible to build that editor with scripted. And I've had a few people come up and ask, I've adopted scripted pipeline, is it going to work with the editor? It's just, someone at CloudBees will win a Nobel Prize in mathematics if they figure it out. In February 2017, early this year, we released the beta of the Blue Ocean Visual Pipeline Editor. And it looked quite a bit, well, not quite I think it looks really different. Maybe you would disagree. It was a really early version of it. It had riddled with bugs, but hey, guess what? People were actually able for the first time to create a pipeline in a visual way without actually even having to know the declarative language. So what we've done is that we've gone, people don't want to learn Groovy, but probably what they don't want to do is learn anything. Let's give them a visual tool to do it, because people, most people are very visual minded, and then they can build their continuous delivery pipeline really quickly using this editor, which can be learned. You can see kind of like where you might click on the screen to do certain things, and it guides you to create that pipeline. And then you don't have to learn declarative either. So, and it really supports this model of, there are certain people in your team that you can probably characterize as, I'm going to edit the would like to edit the pipeline as a text file, and some people who might be more comfortable to edit the pipeline in the visual pipeline editor. And so you can work in two modes. You can edit the declarative text file, have someone edit the declarative text file, and then another person load it up in the editor. They'll do their edit, they'll save it back, and the other person can edit it in their text file, in whatever order, and it will still work. So, and that's the power of adding a model to the language, so we can then enable better tools, which is cool. So we actually spent quite a long time, we had the designs for the editor kind of sitting to the side for a really long time until that declarative pipeline went 1.0, because you really have to stabilize that language in order to then actually build something like this. And in April, we released the Blue Ocean 1.0. Hey, AV people, I had a question for you. Is this HDMI audio? Okay, so I'm just going to have to... Yeah? Okay, fantastic, that's good. So you can create new pipe. So we released Blue Ocean 1.0, and I know we got a lot of feedback saying, I don't really think that this is 1.0. Just like that XKCD comic, there's something missing in the 1.0 for a lot of people. But we really needed to get something out there, and we thought that, with the pipeline editor, being able to connect it up with GitHub, being able to edit that pipeline, save it, run it, visualize it, being able to find problems really quickly using the visualization, and all those things, it was an end-to-end, it fully worked end-to-end for some set of use cases. So we really wanted to get it out there and get it into the hands of people, and we really made sure that we were putting all the spit and polish on it, everything to down to the pixel, sitting behind, going back and forth with the developers. And I'm like, that doesn't quite look like the design. So we're actually putting a lot of care and effort into making sure that end-to-end use cases work and that it is really beautiful and pixel perfect. So we really felt that it was good enough to call 1.0 at that point. And it's really hard to replace a tool like Classic. It's just Jenkins Classic. It's just incredible. So we really went all out for the launch. And I don't know if any of you, has anyone seen the launch video that we did? That's why I was asking about the sound. Oh, that's disappointing. So my marketing team reckoned I couldn't get it done for for less than 20 grand, and I got it done for 800 bucks. All right, so here's our, oops. We'll try. Nope, okay. Ah, damn, excuse me. That's not gonna work.
Continuous delivery shouldn't just be for the experts. That's why we've developed Blue Ocean, the continuous delivery tool for teams just like yours. Creating your first pipeline is a snap. In a few clicks, connect your GitHub repository to Jenkins, then use the visual editor to create your continuous delivery pipeline from start to finish. When you run your pipeline, it's easy to follow along as the pipeline executes. And when things go wrong, you can focus in on problems quickly with pinpoint precision. Your pipeline is run for every new feature branch and pull request created. When the pipeline is done, its status is reported back to GitHub. This lets the whole team know if your code needs more work or is good to go. And why not make Jenkins your own? Customize your dashboard with only the pipelines you're interested in seeing. Jenkins Blue Ocean. Build it, test it, and deploy it. It's that simple.
Not bad, huh? So if you're wondering about the future of Jenkins, it's going to be polish. It takes an incredible amount of time to even come up with a video like that. Like a lot of back and forth. We had a motion designer who came to my house and sat around my dining room table, and I kind of like had like pictures of what I wanted, and he's like, yeah. He's a really smart guy. He does like video clips and things like that. But this is the kind of, like my vision for Jenkins is polish, right? It's making it easier for you guys, and I want this to look like crap in a year. And what we've shipped so far, I want you to like look back on it and go, oh, it's no good. So it was really fun having the Blue Ocean launch and creating the video, and the team were like really excited to get the feedback from the community because they had really, I kept having to tell engineers to go home, they're remote workers, and I'm like, there's a big time difference between Australia and say Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm like, I know that it's 4 a.m. there. You need to go to sleep, and they're just like, just one more thing. So they're really putting, they really put everything they had into shipping it because they really believed in it. So it's just really incredible. In Blue Ocean 1.1, in June, we shipped a number of features. So one of the problems that we had was that we had taken folders away in Blue Ocean. You don't really get to create folders at all in Blue Ocean. So we did a really interesting usability survey where we surveyed quite a number of people from the community and CloudBees Jenkins enterprise customers. And what we found was that, as the number of jobs increased and the number of people, so did the number of folders. And then when we asked the question, right, and this sounds great. So you think folders are a great way to organize. If you ask the users of the people of the foldering system that the admin had set up, like, can you find the things that you're interested in? And they were like, no. And it was a stronger no the more folders they had and the more jobs they had. And the deeper the hierarchy of the folders, the worse that feedback became. And then you found, like with the smaller teams who had no folders or very shallow directory structures, had a very easy time at finding what they were looking for. So we're in a bit of an awkward transition point at the moment with Jenkins and Blue Ocean because there's been a lot of investment in folders. And so what do we do without folders? Well, we've got a few ways that we want to go ahead and solve that. And I'm going to show you what we shipped in Blue Ocean 1.1. Now, it's not a complete solution to the problem, but it's a start. So it's just thinking more critically about like what are people trying to do and how are we offering, what's the means that we're offering to people, and then trying to find a better way and experiment with a better way. And I think it's a lot better if we don't solve the whole problem, but we like work to, we make small changes that are easy to change or remove later that will get us closer to the real solution. So that's really the process of design. So we introduced fast search, and it is pretty fast. So what you can do with fast search is filter that dashboard very, very, very quickly. Now, because you have invested in folders, some of you quite a lot, it does have a nice syntax here that you can use. So say if I have a folder called Jenkins, and then I have jobs A, B, C, D, E, and if I want to find Jenkins E, I could type J/E, and it will only match the folders that have a J in them and any jobs underneath them or folders that contain an E. So you can very quickly navigate using fast search across your whole Jenkins system. And we added some improvements into the next release of Blue Ocean where this auto focuses. So when you come to the dashboard, you can just start typing away. The operations fellow at CloudBees, who, operations manager, Ben Walding, he kept complaining to me that I had removed his folders and he was going to track me down. And I won't repeat what he said, but it was unpleasant. And then I gave him Fast Search, a prototype of it, and he was like, that's slightly better. So that's progress. And he's also Australian, so that's like saying great job. So, yeah. The other thing that we introduced is a feature called trigger reasons. So you've probably seen these pop up in Jenkins Classic, which is like, this build has been, this pipeline has been executed because someone committed to the repository or it was rerun. So it's surfacing more of that information that is present in Classic that wasn't in Blue Ocean and trying to find the right parts to it. You'll notice along and I'll show you in the demo, in Blue Ocean there's a column called messages or message. And it really just displays like something that is important about, say, the run of the pipeline. And we actually developed this heuristic algorithm for it. It's actually just a bunch of if statements, but it sounds cooler that way. that figures out like what is the most important cause for why the pipeline executed, and then displays that to you there. And then, of course, if you say, I have a special description for this run of the pipeline, which you can set using scripted pipelines, then the message itself will update. So instead of it saying push event to branch master, if I say this run was like our really epic, awesome release, I set that as the description, it would say that there. So that you'll see the messages area in Blue Ocean kind of showing you what's really important about the pipeline runs that have happened. The other thing that I mentioned, and I just go back here because I forgot the exact number. One thing that we did is, with every 1.0 version of any product, there's always a lot of defects that you have to go back and fix. So there's always this temptation to rush forward and build features. And it's on the Blue Ocean team, we actually prefer to fix defects and performance problems before we pull on new features. And that ensures that even though the Blue Ocean 1.0 was sort of limited in a lot of ways, it was still the highest quality piece of software that we could build. So we spent a lot of time in Blue Ocean 1.1 just responding to feedback, and I think we fixed over 48 different bugs, and I can't remember how many performance improvements that we did, but there was a lot of profiling and time spent just loading up really big Jenkins data sets and checking that everything responded very quickly. So that was really cool. So that's sort of what happened between the beta and 1.1, and it's really incredible that there's 14,000 installations of Blue Ocean in just a year. Jenkins itself, there are about 170,000 Jenkins instances worldwide, so we've still got quite a ways to go. But that number keeps growing every month. And it's really interesting to see, particularly with the holiday season in America or in Europe, just sort of the dips in the numbers. It's like Thanksgiving or before and after Thanksgiving, no way, no growth at all. And then all of a sudden it comes back up. It's and then the next month it's kind of quieter. So don't upgrade your software and go on holiday. You're going to have a bad time. So let's walk through what we have in Blue Ocean 1.2. You may have noticed in some of the screenshots that we've had in the convention center that we've got a slightly updated design. So we spent a bit of time speaking to people about what they liked and what they didn't like about the design of Blue Ocean. And one of the things that people identified was that on tables that had had a sparse amount of columns, they found it really difficult for their eye to track across the screen because we didn't have any lines delineating rows. So our nice, clear, clean visual design was actually a bad design. And our designer in Sydney spent a lot of time going over the whole user interface, looking at the tables and how they're used, and came up with this really nice table design. Now, you might say it still has a lot of white space, but really what it allows you to do is focus in, there's a bunch of user experience studies that talk about like white space and things, but it really helps your eye track to the like separate the information that is displayed on the screen. Now, tables can be incredibly dense, and so they become harder to read with more information on the screen. So having a little bit more space, between the columns, between each row, really helps to, your eyes not to glaze over when you're trying to read information. So you can actually see here I was speaking about the latest message as well. So we introduced this, commit lozenge, so you can see sort of how many commits were in the run of that pipeline. And there had some great suggestions from the community, like, can I just click on that and get to the changes list in the run? And the answer is yes, we're going to do that. And so lots of little improvements like that that we just get from feedback. So keep that feedback coming. It's really good. The next thing that we implemented was full color, full ASCII color for the logs. Now, the way that Jenkins works, as you all know, is via plugins. And so the request was not that I wanted color in my logs, it's that I wanted Blue Ocean support for the ASCII color plugin. And I was like, why would you not want to have ASCII color? It looks really good. And if your tools are outputting it, the designer of the tool has probably decided that that's a good thing for you. So we've actually just built it in, right into Blue Ocean, so you don't need an extra plugin. And I think there'll be more things like that in Blue Ocean where we're like, instead of you going out and foraging for the right plugin, we'll just bundle it in. So we don't do plugins anymore, we do features, which is going to be a big change, I think, to the way that we approach building Jenkins. And what was really, really great is that there's a lot of efficiency gains to be made in, like, for us in terms of development. In order to support the ASCII plugin, ASCII color plugin in the way that it ships as a plugin, is actually quite a bit of an engineering feat. But Josh, one of our really great front-end developers from Brisbane in Australia, he got annoyed and just picked this off the backlog and said, I'm just going to do it. And he had it working in a day. And it was like, that we needed to build like a really sophisticated plugin system in the browser to like support the ASCII color plugin. Well, we are building one of those, but we need to ship that before we can go and build this feature. But he just went and did it. And I think it looks really great and adds a nice bit of extra context to viewing logs. Now, I mentioned declarative pipeline just before. We introduced a new feature in 1.2 called conditional stages. So this is a little snippet of a declarative pipeline that's a little bit more. There's a pipeline block that wraps around the stage. And what you can say is, particularly if you're using a pipeline created by Blue Ocean or using multi-branch in Classic, you probably don't want to run your production deploy for all your feature branches. So what this allows you to do is say, hey, you know what, conditionally, when the branch is master, execute this stage. It's very, very simple. So that would only execute if the branch I was running on was master. The great thing about when expression for conditional stages is that you can do ands and ors. You can even execute a small expression in pipeline script as the condition for your conditional stages. And you can take a look at the Jenkins pipeline documentation on jenkins.io/doc for how you can make full use of it. So it's really easy to do this now. In scripted, you would have had to like look up the environment variable for, the branch, and then sometimes that's set depending on what job you have set up, kind of pipeline job you've set up, and then you would have to do an if statement, and then maybe you still actually want to see the stage that you skipped in the visualization, but because it's a program, it's never got executed, so Blue Ocean's not aware of it. And so what we did after we built that into Declarative is that we came up with a really nice design to show how stages are skipped. So I think you could probably pick out which stages are skipped in this visualization. No? No? All right. And the developer I was talking about, Josh, is this incredible, he's an incredible Hulk of an Australian guy who likes to drink whiskey and smoke cigars in his hammock with his laptop. and spent like a million years getting the curves just right around around the skip visualization, and he's just a real wizard. So we're really glad to have him on the team. It's actually interesting. We originally gave this whole pipeline visualization thing to Josh, and he's like, "This is really cool." And so he goes away reading about SVG and all sorts of things, and like the mathematics for the curves. And I said to our engineering manager Michael, I was like, "Where's Josh gone?" Like after like 3 weeks. And he's like, "He's still working on that visualization." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Getting kind of worried. Like, what's going on? And then he came back. It was like, Moses coming down from the mountain with the visualization, and like these beautiful curves that are like exactly like how we designed them. And he'd been working with the designer to like get it done perfectly, and it was just like absolutely brilliant.
If you use the same syntax in scripted, it will be displayed the same?
Nope, it's declarative only. So the question was, if I use the same syntax in scripted, will it work like this? No, declarative. So the problem is that declarative is not a script. Like it's like a config file. So the way that the editor works is it reads it in as a model and understands it before it gets executed. In order to understand the model of a scripted pipeline, we would need to write a parser, which is kind of like what the compiler does, a Groovy compiler does, and pull it apart and do a whole bunch of complex stuff, which we'd probably never ever get right. You'd be very dissatisfied if we did that. We'd just never get it working the way that people want it. Yes, sir?
So if you were to set up conditional like on one of these parallel steps, would it do the same thing?
I love that question because it leads to another thing. So the question was, if I set up the condition on a parallel stage, would it do the same thing? And the answer is very soon. So we're actually, we borrowed the syntax for parallel from scripted pipeline. And we were never really happy with the syntax. Like it's something that like even I need to go and like look up. And in the new syntax, you can just wrap, like if we go back to our example here, you can just wrap a parallel block around a stage, and then it becomes a parallel. Whereas the syntax we had before was like you're passing an array of, groovy closures to like, it's just to a function, and it was like, you have to be pretty good at Groovy to like really understand what was going on. So it's all about making the language simpler, and when we can do that, we can do better things. So one of the great advantages, so that's coming in probably the next release, parallel stages. One of the great things is that, with a stage in declarative pipeline and with the editor, you can actually set an agent directive and have that stage run inside a Docker file. You'll be able to do that for parallel branches as well, because they are parallel stages. It's just stages everywhere. So, we now that we have a very simple vocabulary for the pipeline, we can start using that vocabulary to compose more sophisticated structures, right? But it's all the same basic elements. Cool. So I think, like, if anyone asks me what my favorite thing is in Blue Ocean, it's not the editor, it's not the blue color, although that's nice. It's the visualization. Every time I look at it, I'm like, this is nice. So, hands up who went to the keynote. Cool. Who saw my embarrassing crash? Yeah. That's because my terminal app crashed. I'd set it up there, it was all running, crashed. But what you probably also would have saw just after I was on stage is our friend from Eric from Atlassian, who's in the audience today, got up and announced the Bitbucket cloud and server connectors for Blue Ocean. So I mentioned before, like back in 1.0 days, we only supported GitHub, and now, thanks to our friends at Atlassian and the collaboration that we did, you can do this with GitHub, Bitbucket server and Bitbucket cloud, and it's really great. And we've got some really good plans in store that I won't spoil the surprise, but we've got some really great plans in store that it's going to make using Bitbucket and Blue Ocean like crazy, crazy good, and hopefully with Jira too. One thing that is coming, and we do get a lot of questions, is like, I use GitLab. Where's my GitLab button? and I tried using the Git button, and I didn't get a pipeline editor. So I'm really sorry about that. So what we're actually shipping in the next release is what we call native Git creation and editing. So using any Git server, whether it's GitLab or Gatia or some SSH Git server that you've set up, you'll be able to click the Git button here and get pipeline editor experience just like everybody else. We do also have on the roadmap a native GitLab integration that'll sort of be equivalent to the GitHub one.
So I can connect to GitHub right now. What's the advantage here? What's new here?
So the difference, what's the question from this man in the audience was, what's the advantage of clicking one of these sort of native integrations versus the Git option? And it's really like not the creation experience, it's the ability to detect things like pull requests or merge requests and have them run as part of the pipeline. So if you click the Git option and you put in your Bitbucket Git URL, you wouldn't get any pull requests built. So, and none of that nice stuff that you saw in the video. No worries. Any other questions? What about Gerrit? So Gerrit model is slightly different. I was talking to a few people about the Gerrit plugin at the conference. We don't use it ourselves on the Jenkins project or at CloudBees, so we're really relying on the community to help us out with that one to get it right. So, cool. Oh, yep.
Can you pause the pipeline or put in a pause saying, wait,
That's a good question. So the question was, can I pause the pipeline? You can actually do that in Jenkins Classic to a certain degree. So one of the things that I try to do when we map Classic features into Blue Ocean is go and try it ourselves and make sure it works in all the use cases. I've been told that it works, but I would like to prove to myself that it works before we would expose that feature. But it's interesting that you've brought that up. I'd love to actually, if you want to come and have a chat after the presentation, I'd like to talk about your use cases and things. So, yeah.
When I create a new job, be it Git or Bitbucket team project or GitHub organization, the backend, it creates a Bitbucket team organization folder when we do it from Classic. Is the XML file that gets created in the backend exactly the same, or is it different when you do it from Blue Ocean?
So if I create, the question was, if I create through Blue Ocean, what does it create in Jenkins Classic, and is the data that gets persisted for the configuration of that job or that item the same as if I did it through Classic? So to unpack that, so yes, if you create, so really what we're doing when you click the new pipeline button is we're creating a multi-branch pipeline item type under the hood, and it's pretty much exactly the same. Now, there is an extra configuration option that we put in there. So when when we were thinking about for the first time, oh, someone's going to have to enter a username and password into Blue Ocean, where are we going to put that username and password? And you're probably familiar with Jenkins credentials. So the credential system is really flexible. You can have credentials on on the root level for the whole Jenkins server. That would be a bad place to put your GitHub details or your Bitbucket details, awful, because someone else could reuse them. We could put them at a folder level, but we don't have folders. But credentials actually allows us to store in against your user. So when you enter in your access key or your username and password, we actually store that against your user. And there's a slight modification to the config of your job that says, when I set this job up, what I'm actually doing is I'm delegating control to other people who have access to this job to run the pipeline with my details, right? And you can go to Classic and you can change that to be like some global one that you've set or whatever it might be, or you move the job into a folder and it's nice and secure. You can do all of that, but what is a sensible place to put that credential? And so there's a little property there that basically is a special Blue Ocean thing that basically gives the Jenkins system access to your credentials and does all that kind of stuff. When we actually, credentials are a really interesting topic because, we're building out this support for Git at the moment. And so we're thinking about, okay, what does it really mean for someone to put their private key SSH private key in Blue Ocean. What if some hacker gets into Jenkins and steals your private key? Think about your private key and how many systems it probably can access. That's a really bad, that's a huge security anti-pattern, right? So we don't want you to enter in your SSH private key. What we're actually asking you to do when you go through this creation process for Git is we generate a public and private key for you that's associated with your Jenkins user, and then you take the public key we generated and you register it with your Git server so that if Jenkins gets attacked and they get hold of that public key, all they can get is your source code, not the keys to the castle, right? Like they can't get, you know what I mean? They can't like burrow under the fort and take over your infrastructure. So, as we're going, sometimes it is a bit slow going because we have to stop and go, wait a second, what does it really mean to let somebody do something like this? Is this a good thing? And it takes a lot of time and scenario building to figure out like what the right, what the right answer is. So with Git, we really prefer people to use this public key option. And I think there'll be more features in Blue Ocean and in Jenkins itself that'll make use of that public key. And of course, you can always go and reset that public key, and it will break access to all the systems if you do get compromised. That's what we do. Cool. Right, so the question is, if I use folders for variables, where would I put those variables? You would have to put them, so we don't have a good answer for that at the moment. So that's another problem that we have to work through. It's the same thing now, yeah. So just to move on, so Blue Ocean 1.2 is available today. We do have a roadmap ahead of us, which includes pipeline creation for Git, parallel stages, as I mentioned before. We're going to do a slight redesign of what the running pipeline experience looks like. We're going to get better parity between the editor and declarative pipeline, which is really important to reduce that potential gap. We're going to have a place for you to change the pipeline settings. Really simple. It's going to be really, really easy to read and easy to figure out what those things mean. So we're going to review all the fields and go through what it means and like, should we expose this field? Like, is this a power user thing? Because they could probably go to classic. Also, credential management is a big thing. People switch back to classic very, very often when they're when they're trying to set up their new jobs or like change passwords and things like that, and that's just a massive pain. But you can go ahead and get, go see the full roadmap. I update this very frequently. It's jenkins.io/projects/blueocean/roadmap. It looks really pretty, and it's really easy to read. So I got designers to go over and give it a good pass over so that it's just not like a crummy HTML table. So care at every level. And I just really want to thank the whole community for the amazing feedback that you've given us about Blue Ocean. It's just a real honor to be working on a project like this and to have such passionate people in the community. And so I really want to thank you for all the kind words. And I really look forward to working with you all on making Jenkins a great experience. So thank you very much.